If you think you've been doing everything right and you still don't feel good, there may be something that you haven't discovered yet. We're going to talk about that today. So your nervous system controls how your body functions, all the cells, tissues, and organs in your body, and it connects you to your environment. When I ask people what controls everything in their body, and I ask them, most people will say something like their cardiovascular system or their heart. In reality, your nervous system is like a conductor who's conducting a beautiful orchestra where all the pieces are all your different organ and gland systems in your body. They're all important. There's not one more important than the other, but they're all listening to, watching what's happening with that conductor. If you don't feel good, doesn't it make sense to check the system that controls everything? That system happens to be your nervous system. So we're going to talk about how your nervous system is designed and how it functions from just a really basic perspective. This is a side view of your brain and your spinal cord. Your brain and your spinal cord are really one continuous unit, all made up of trillions of these little things here that I'm drawing called nerves. Those nerves go to every part of your body, and we call this the central nervous system. Anything that the body thinks is important, it encases it in bone. So you think about that brain encased in bone and your whole spinal column encased in bone, yet you can still move it. So your nervous system here controls and coordinates everything in your body, relates you back to your environment. Signals travel from your brain telling your body what to do, and those signals travel over the nerves. Your body does its thing, and then those signals will travel back to the brain telling your brain, hey, we just did something. This is a functional pattern. When we ask people, hey, what is health? Most people will say health is all about feeling good. In reality, we like to see that health is more than just feeling good. It's about how your body functions. Some medical textbooks say that health is 100% of your body functioning 100% of the time. Other textbooks say that health is a state of optimal physical, chemical, and emotional well-being, not merely the absence of a disease. So what we're looking at is if health is 100% of how you function 100% of the time, we have to ask ourselves, what's controlling function? And your body function is controlled by your central nervous system. So doesn't it make sense that you get your nervous system checked when you're not feeling well? That's my goal for you, is to ask yourself, hey, if my body's not working right, I wonder if my nervous system is doing the job it's supposed to be doing, or is there something blocking my nervous system function? This is what can happen, is you can get a block to your nervous system that's interfering with the signals from your brain to your body, that's wiping out proper function. As long as everything is functioning properly, we're going to just write that in here, normal function is going to lead to living your life in a state of ease, which is going to lead to experiencing health. And when we're healthy, we are going to ideally feel good. So this is the normal process of the body. 100% of the body functioning 100% of the time. If there's any interference to this process, what's it going to look like? Any interference from the signals from the brain to the body or the body back to the brain is going to create some malfunction. And if that malfunction is just 10% decreased function, you have to ask yourself, is that okay with you? Is it okay if your body's functioning 10% less than it should? Well, maybe for a day or two, but what about a year, 5 years, 10 years down the road? What's going to happen is that dysfunction, malfunction is going to accumulate, and we're going to start experiencing life in the state of dis-ease. Not yet a disease, but this is when you just don't feel like you have all the energy that you need. You can't do what you want to do when you want to do it. You're wondering what's happening. Something just doesn't feel like yourself. You're experiencing life in a state of dis-ease. If this continues on, what are we going to get? Eventually, we're going to have a whole host of symptoms that medicine is excellent at identifying a disease. Now, if this continues on, what's going to happen to our health? If we have ill function, we're going to have ill health. And eventually, how are we going to feel? We're going to start feeling bad. Now, I always like to say, if all the medications in America were free and you could just take the perfect drug to make you feel better, does that all of a sudden make us any healthier? Well, it doesn't, right? It just covers up the problem. So what's the problem? One major problem that most people are missing is their nervous system isn't functioning the way it should. And in chiropractic, this problem we call a subluxation. So chiropractors are trained by where there's subluxations in the spine. Remove those subluxations so it allows the signals to flow properly again from the brain to the body and back to the brain. Now, if this is me and I'm only functioning 10% less than normal, is that going to be okay? Well, for a little bit, it might be all right. But think about this, and I just want to think about my children. If my children have a nervous system that's not functioning 100%, it's something less than that, I'm not okay with that. That's why I love the chiropractic work that we do, is because we can make a change in a child's nervous system. In my own life, I know if I would have been checked as a child, it would have changed everything for me with asthma and migraines as I got older. What we're holding here is our spine. And I always like people to take a real close look at it and just look at the spine and ask yourself, where's the biggest part of your spine and where's the smallest part of the spine? So you'll see that the spine is built like a tree. It's large at the base and the vertebrae slowly get smaller. These are the vertebrae. The space in between the vertebrae are your vertebral discs. Your discs actually grow in and are part of your vertebrae. Notice that there's discs between all the vertebrae until we get up to the smallest part of the spine, which is right at the top. All right, right at the very top, this model's not wrong. There is no disc between your C1 and your C2. And there's no disc between your head and your C1. We call the C1 the atlas. So the atlas holds up this big bowling ball, your head, which weighs 10 to 14 pounds. Now, what happens is, look at the anatomy here. We have the smallest vertebrae in your spine that weighs 2 ounces, your atlas, sitting underneath and holding up your world or your skull at 10 to 14 pounds. That's a very interesting mismatch that we have in the spine. It's very easy to have a problem, a subluxation, right at the very top of the skull because of our current living standards and how we have falls, accidents, and injuries that can create stress right at the base of the skull. Now, between your vertebrae, where two vertebrae come together, you're going to have a little hole where all the nerves of the spine, these yellow things are all your nerves, and those nerves are all protected, so you can't directly touch them. But when you look at the base of the skull, you'll see that there are 4 little nerves that come out right underneath your skull that are only protected by the muscles of your neck. So in our practice, what we do is we come in here and we feel how much pressure can be on those nerves, because guess what? Those nerves can get really tender when your atlas is out of alignment, enough to cause pressure in this spot. And that's one way that we can tell how we need to adjust you when we need to adjust you. So that's the spine. When we look at the spine from the side, this is the normal curvature of the spine. It should curve like that. And when we're looking at your spine from the back, ideally, it should be perfectly straight. You can imagine if a person's spine is scoliotic or curved, my question is always, do you think that person needs more spinal care or less spinal care? Hopefully the answer is obvious. If you're already crooked, you need more spinal care, right? Because gravity is always pulling on us and it's always going to make our curves worse. So that's the spine, and that's how it's related. If we look down from the front, we can see where that spinal cord comes right down through the skull, and it comes right down through all these little vertebrae. Now, in our practice, one of the things that we are going to look at, imagine that this spine is perfect, and we're going to just kind of show me. Don't look too close because you'll see that I have one shoulder higher and lower because I have a little scoliosis in my spine. Ideally, my eyes are going to be level with the horizon, shoulders are going to be level, pelvis is going to be level, and my center of gravity is going to go down right through the center of my feet. Now, if I get out of alignment enough to where my eyes aren't level, my brain is going to do something amazingly intelligent. It's called the righting mechanism. That righting mechanism is going to say, hey, Keith, we're not going to walk around like this because it makes it really difficult to balance and coordinate. And if we stay like that, we're going to experience some vertigo. So the brain is going to say, hey, if you're not going to fix this and get the head back on straight, then what we're going to do, the brain says, we're going to pull the muscles of the spine down on the left until my eyes become level with the horizon again. And we're going to pull the hip up on the right to balance what's going on in my mid-back. So now my eyes are perfectly level, but I have a high shoulder, I have a high hip, and if you put me on a table, I'm going to have a short leg. That is all a compensatory mechanism that our body is designed to make in order to survive, to keep ourselves balanced. That can lead to problems with lower back pain, for example. So when I start to show you this, my low back starts to hurt immediately. This is why many people who come in, they've been everywhere. They've looked for solutions for their low back problem. They've had their back x-ray, they've had an MRI, they've had a massage, they've had it pulled on, they've had it rubbed out, they've had TENS units on it, everything done to it because that's where it hurts. When we get that head back in alignment and on straight again, now the brain can go, oh, we can relax this upper shoulder, we can relax this lower back, we can stand upright again because we're not doing any compensatory pattern to balance what's happening at the very top. This is why it's so critical that we start at the top and work our way down and keeping your head on straight. Now, as we're looking at this atlas joint up here at the very top, we have the most range of motion at the very top of the spine. Remember I said we don't have a disc between the head and the atlas and C2? That's because we have a lot of movement that we need to make when we rotate our head. That movement is critical, right? Lets us do a lot of things. We don't have that much movement in the rest of the whole spine. Everything down lower combines together to move just a little bit. So because we have a lot of movement, this is the easiest way to come out of alignment. If we turn our head too far to the right or too far to the left, you have an opportunity to come out of alignment again where you're going to need to get your atlas adjusted. And that's one of the reasons that you're watching this video, is so that you can learn what not to do so that you can keep yourself in alignment and get better quicker and stay better longer. One big thing, being careful not to turn your head too far right or left. What does too far mean? Well, for me, it means no farther than this because I can feel tension in my neck. And with experience, I've learned that if I try to go more than that, I'm actually going to create a subluxation pattern at the base of my skull, which is what I don't want to do. So for everybody, you want to look at, hey, how far can I turn comfortably? And don't try to force it if you have a problem up there. Ideally, you should be able to turn 45 degrees very smoothly. And if you can't even turn 45 degrees without pain or clicking or popping, then you know that there's something wrong in your upper cervical spine that you need to get checked. The other movement is extending your head back too far or down too far. So if we look at this bowling ball, we've got a head, a 10 to 14 pound bowling ball sitting on top of a neck. As long as I keep that neck perfectly underneath the bowling ball, everything is nice and balanced. But as soon as I start to draw that bowling ball forward, call that anterior head posture, the force in my muscles to hold this bowling ball up doubles exponentially for every inch it moves forward. So if my head moves forward an inch, these muscles in my shoulder, they have to tighten down twice as much as if my head was straight. Anytime that we bring that head a too far flexion or too far extension and hold it there for a long time, puts a tremendous amount of strain at your atlas, and that can knock your atlas out of alignment. Now imagine that in an accident, motor vehicle accident, fall, injury, landing on your head. Most people today are walking around on their phone with this bowling ball all the way forward. On average, that puts 60 extra pounds of force on your neck that your neck doesn't need to have. Imagine if your head is in this forward position and you're holding your head here on your iPad or your phone. This is like having 3 watermelons that are hanging from your lower neck. That's putting a lot of stress in that lower neck, more stress than it needs to have, which can lead to chronic misalignment in your lower neck that just doesn't ever go away. So that's one of the big things that we want to look at, that you want to prevent, is making sure we're not stuck in a position of forward flexion too far for too long or extending your head back too far for too long, because that's the same idea. And you can imagine at a gym, if you're working out, if you're doing squats, and what do you do when you're really tired at the end of your set? Sometimes we're going to bring our head back like this and try to get that last set in and boom, push it up. All that force when you bring your head back on your neck can also push that atlas out of alignment. So we want to make sure that when we're lifting heavy things, we do what's called a chin tuck, just tucking that chin down and holding that head nice and straight so that we're doing squat, lifting things up off the ground, that we're able to keep our head still in alignment. So those are the basic things we want to do to make sure that your head still stays in alignment, that we don't have any interference happening up there. Now, we're going to go back to our drawing here, and we're going to show this big safety pin. So this safety pin is designed to help you remember something called the safety pin cycle, and it relates back to your central nervous system. So the top of the safety pin represents your brain, your central nervous system. The bottom of the safety pin represents all your organs, glands, blood vessels Everything is controlled by your nervous system. And each of the side of the safety pin is going to represent nerves coming out to the body and nerves going back to the brain. So as long as there's no interference in that nervous system, the signals from your brain are going to get to your body and work just fine. The question now can become, hey, are the signals coming from my body making it back to their brain? Well, if there's no interference, it's all going to work great. But what if there is interference and there's a disconnection? Then those cells aren't going to be able to send the signals they need to back to the brain. This happens often with people with something like GERD or upset stomach. Many times when they're eating, your brain sees there's food coming in, says, hey, we're going to eat a chicken fat sandwich for lunch. Your brain says, we need so many enzymes to digest that food. Those enzymes have to come in and start digesting the food before you eat and chew it. As long as the signals from your brain are getting to your stomach's going to say, okay, we're going to start pumping out enzymes. And as long as those signals come back to the brain, they say, hey, you're doing what I told you to. But if there's a disconnect and the signal's coming back to the brain, what's going to happen? Your stomach is going to get this signal to create more enzymes, more juices, but your brain doesn't get the signal back that it's doing its job. So the brain is going to continue to send signals. The signals say, make more enzymes, more digestive fluid. And what's going to happen when you eat that meal? Well, after you eat the meal, you're going to start to feel GERD, gastric reflux disease, because you've got too much juice down here because your body's not getting the information. The same thing happens on the other side. If the brain's sending a signal to your stomach that says, hey, here comes a chicken fat sandwich, and your brain's not able to send that signal and your stomach doesn't receive it, then your stomach's going to start sitting there waiting, not knowing what to do, and that food is going to sit in your stomach, and you're not going to have the enzymes to digest it. And so as soon as we can get that spine adjusted to the area that controls your stomach, we can start to establish that connection again, so the whole connection starts to work better. So that's one way that this safety pin cycle works, a million times up and down your spine with all your organs, cells, and tissues of your body. We see these same issues that we're talking about with the stomach juices and GERD, with hormone issues, headache problems, tight muscles, feelings of being imbalanced. We see the same connection with hormonal issues. All the different hormones creates anxiety, stress, depression, difficulty thinking, difficulty concentrating. This whole loop is a system that needs to be evaluated and corrected so that we can reestablish normal function in this system. We're going to grab that spine again, and now what we want to do is just take a quick look in here at our spine and our nerves. And we're going to do what's called a cross-sectional view of one nerve. We're asking ourselves, what's going on inside this one little nerve? This is the cross-section of a nerve. And inside that nerve, we have a lot of things going on. 45% of your nervous system is doing one thing, 45% of that nervous system is doing something else, which leaves 10% of the nervous system doing something else. So we're going to go through all these parts of the nervous system. 45% of your nerves are controlling what's called your motor nervous system, right? So we're just going to write up here motor nerves. Those motor nerves are you moving, doing what you want to do when you want to do it. All right, so that's going to be that motor nervous system part. The other part of that then is going to be your autonomic. Your autonomic nervous system is what keeps you alive and you're not thinking about it. You're resting, you're digesting, your heart's beating. Even when you're asleep, you continue to breathe. That's all autonomic functions that you don't have to think about. So if we just look at this part of your nervous system, there's 90%. That's 90% information about function. The other 10% of your nervous system is controlling or receiving information about sense, right? That's your sensory nervous system. So your sensory nervous system, it gets information like temperature, like taste, like sight, hearing, like smelling, and a whole lot of other sensations like light touch, hard touch, proprioception, vibration, and something called nociception. Now, nociception is important because nociception is what we all know as pain. So if you look back at this chart, if all I'm focusing on is your pain, how much of your nervous system information and data am I actually gathering? If all we focus on is one thing, pain, I'm missing more than 90% of what's happening inside of the body. That's like 1 out of 10 chance that you're going to make a difference by focusing on pain. Whereas if we're focusing on function, we have a 9 out of 10 chance that we're going to make a difference. That's why in our office, we have questions like, hey, how are your motor nerves functioning? Interesting. We can actually test that by doing nervous system scans. How are your autonomic nerves functioning? We can also test that with our equipment in our office. Once we get that data, we get a view or insight into how your nervous system is working 90% of the time. And when we find areas in your spine that aren't functioning properly, or are subluxated, those are the areas that we're going to start fixing so that your nervous system can start to rebalance and work the way that it should. 10% is what most people are focusing on. This is why we have patients who come in all the time and say, hey, doc, you know what? It's my knee. My knee hurts. I've been everywhere. I've had it looked at, MRI'd, x-rays, yanked on, everything, and my knee still hurts. Well, what new thing am I going to do for you that hasn't been done already? What we're going to do is we're going to check the whole body and recognize that a knee didn't walk into my office, but a person walked into my office who has a whole sense of balance, a whole nervous system, and the knee can just be a compensatory pattern that shows up because your nervous system is out of balance. Once we get that balance, everything is going to start to work right. Can't tell you how many times we see people with these types of problems when we do their nervous system test and we find all kinds of problems at the very top, like I showed initially, where the body is twisted here and the problem is showing up on the other side of the body. Once we get this balanced, everything has a chance to actually put itself back in alignment. We've seen thousands of patients who have all kinds of different symptoms related back to the nervous system, and the reason we get the results we do is because we always go back to the core to check that nervous system, make sure it's working right, so that a patient can start to normalize and work better. There you have it. By treating the nervous system first, we're going to get down to the core issues that you may be having that nobody else has checked. For more information, check out our website, and we look forward to seeing you in our office soon.